A black cop knows if he shoots an innocent white kid, he is going to jail forever. And if he doesn't go to jail forever, a group of white men are going to come and pull him out of his house. Then they lynched us legally. They became police officers. This stuff ain't never stopped.
Yeah, hey, you see the cops pull me over, the cops pull me over, hey. Yeah, now I'm just riding with my amigos, hey.
What's going on, everybody? I want to welcome y'all to the first inaugural episode of the Rell Talk podcast. I'm sure most of y'all know me from Rell Talk, the show on YouTube. You can still find that show. I'm still going to be shooting videos, but I wanted to try the podcast thing because it's something I always wanted to do. And right out of college, I did some stuff with radio. So you can find it by going to YouTube and just searching raleighrell or searching Rell Talk. Today, I want to start the show off. I want to kick it off by talking about racist police officers. Now, I know racism is something that we don't want to talk about. We hate talking about racism because we would rather think it doesn't exist. But once again, in America, in a major city in America, we're having to deal with police officers sending racist texts to each other and talking about black people, brown people, or non-white people. So CNN reported a story about an officer in San Francisco. He sent racist text and homophobic slurs about people he was seeing to other police officers. I'll let y'all hear the story just so we can, get a gist of what's going on, so I won't feel like y'all lost in what I'm talking about.
San Francisco's police department is once again embroiled in controversy over some highly disturbing racist text messages. At the center of the scandal is Officer Jason Lai. Now, Lai resigned a few weeks ago, but he wore the uniform for 6 years. He allegedly uses disparaging language not only towards black people, but towards Mexicans and Indians as well. San Francisco Public Defender Jeff Adachi provided the text to CNN at the request of reporters. They came to light during a separate investigation of the officer. Lai's attorney told us that the texts are not reflective of who he is, and there's no evidence that he carried out any of those sentiments as an officer. But the scandal is far wider than one officer and his racist text. You see, the SFPD went through the same thing a year ago, where more than a dozen officers were found to have sent highly offensive racist texts. In both cases, the discoveries were accidental. The officers were being investigated for various crimes when officers basically stumbled upon the messages while looking through phone records. Then you had the controversial shooting last December of 26-year-old Mario Woods, the knife-wielding suspect infamously captured on cell phone video. He was shot more than 20 times. Critics say it was an unnecessary use of force. The department is still investigating. But in light of the community backlash, the department says it wants to change how officers confront suspects with knives. As you can imagine, Chief Greg Sir is under enormous pressure to show that these are isolated issues and that there's not some deep cultural problem within the department. He says he has no tolerance for this behavior. At stake is not just the chief and his department, but perhaps the image of the city itself.
Okay, so just so we're all on the same page, I want to let y'all hear. I want to read y'all some of the stuff that this officer, and I guess other officers, had text to each other about people at one particular time or another. Some of the texts read, F that nigga. I hate that beaner, but I think that niggas is worse. Indian people are disgusting. And these texts I'm about to read to y'all, I think, are the officer talking to another officer through text message. He said, white power in one message. In another message, he said, I was trying to be nice to you as everyone knows you're gay. I love calling you a fag. Good enough? Looks like the minutes ran out on your Mexican phone. Again, bitch. We got 2 black boys at my kid's school who are brother and sister. They're there because their dad works for the school district. I am watching them like hawks. See, now that kind of thing really pisses me off, man. And I'm going to tell y'all why. Because every time somebody in the black community is harassed by the police, and they report the story, or every time you go on these forums or you go on these websites where they allow users to comment, and there's a story posted about a black person saying they were mistreated, saying that the charges were trumped up, saying they were framed, the very first thing a white person will say is, well, you shouldn't have been committing a crime, or here we go playing the race card, or everybody's not racist, or they try to act like we're officer shaming. Nobody ever believes when a black man or black woman, Sandra Bland, says, I'm being harassed by the police officers, if it's not caught on video. And most of the time, even if it's caught on video, they still don't believe us. And I think that's sad, because what's happening is we've created an environment where if somebody says, I didn't do it, or the cop harassed me, or the cop planted it on me, they're automatically made out to be liars, automatically. And white society doesn't want to believe that police officers are racist. And let me be clear to y'all, this officer whose text messages I was reading was an Asian cop. Remember? He was an Asian cop. Now, if you can remember, about 2 weeks ago, an Asian cop was not convicted or not sentenced to prison time for killing Akai Gurley in New York City. Let me tell y'all about that case. So Akai Gurley was living in a public housing in New York. Somehow the power went out in this building, and 2 police officers were just patrolling the building because the power was out. Akai Gurley and his girlfriend were on another floor. The elevator wasn't working, obviously, because the power was out. So while the police officer is patrolling this other floor in this stairwell, Akai Gurley and his girlfriend come in on the stairwell below them because, again, they got to take the stairwell because the elevator's out. The officer, for some odd reason, had his gun drawn, and I guess because it was dark, the noise from Akai Gurley entering the stairwell startled Officer Peter Liang, and he accidentally fired his weapon. The bullet ricocheted and hit Akai Gurley and killed him. It didn't kill him instantly, but it killed him, because he didn't get medical attention fast enough. And the reason why is because the officer didn't call for dispatch immediately. Him and the other officer were trying to figure out what they were going to say. So the brother laid there and died when he could have gotten help and he could have lived, but they didn't because they were trying to figure out how they were going to, talk about, or they were trying to figure out how they were going to figure out what to say about why he was shot. Now, he was convicted of murder, and then it was manslaughter. Then it was whatever they call it. I think it was homicide. Let's say manslaughter. Okay, I know it's something less, but I can't think of it right off the top of my head right now. But nevertheless, he wasn't convicted of any jail time. He didn't spend any time in jail. And the thing that pissed people off the most is that the DA, which is a black guy, said he didn't recommend jail time for the officer because the officer, it was an accident. Now, we understand it was an accident, but so what? Okay? So what? You killed somebody. Okay? You got to do some kind of jail time because you killed someone. Okay? And the Asian community a few months ago was out in New York City protesting, holding up signs, saying stuff like, well, you didn't convict the cop who killed Michael Brown. You didn't convict George Zimmerman. They weren't saying our officer was wrong. Please forgive him. We understand he must do some time, but we promise you it wasn't racial. No, they weren't saying that. They were saying, well, y'all let Michael Brown's killer off. Y'all let Trayvon Martin's killer off. As if they wanted a pass, as if they wanted to get the same privileges for killing black and brown people as white officers do. And that's what I had a problem with. I had a problem with that. So much so where when you read this story now about the Asian police officer in San Francisco who's talking about there are black kids at his kid's school and they only go to their school because their father works for the school system and he's watching them like hawks. When you hear that, when you see that, so I'm assuming this is a predominant school district, and he feels as though if their parents didn't have some kind of money, or if their parents, didn't have a position in the school system, their kids wouldn't deserve to go to this school. He feels as though, they shouldn't be there. They only go there because their dad works it. So what? So what? I mean, what type of of idiocy is that to say they only go here because their dad works for the school system. Well, let me be clear. Everything we do in life happens because something before us or before it occurred. It's cause and effect. But every time, somebody that looks like myself is racially profiled or is mistreated by the police, it's automatically looked at as we're lying, and the police officer would never do that, would never do it. Now, I know all cops aren't bad, so please don't let me make it sound like I'm just cop bashing, because I'm not. But I'm telling y'all, there are some police officers out here who are straight wicked. There are some police officers out here who are only out here to criminalize and lock up young black males. I'll give you a perfect example. A few weeks ago, my brother calls me and says that there was an issue with a police officer in the neighborhood that my aunt lives in. Now, just to paint you all a picture, my aunt lives in a white neighborhood. My nieces and nephew are over my aunt's house playing because my brother, which is their father, is over there. So they're outside playing with some little white girls, and somebody calls the police because evidently in the past few weeks, kids have been throwing rocks and busting car windows. So somebody calls the police because little kids are out playing. So the police come. Mind you, they're down a hill, so you can't see the kids playing from my aunt's house. So my brother is about to leave, so he naturally goes to get his kids. As he walks down the hill, he sees a police officer talking to my nephew. So instantly he's like, yo, what's going on? And the cop is just standing there like, just talking to the kids. Now, mind you, you don't talk to anybody's children if their parents aren't around. The first thing an officer should say is, where are your parents? But he didn't. He had my nephews on the corner. My nephews are, 7 or 8. So I'm going to say 7, 13, and 10. So they're on a curb talking to this police officer while the little white girls that they were playing with were over on the porch with their parents. And the little white girls told my brother that they told the police officers that those particular kids didn't live in the neighborhood, that they had never played with them before, and that they didn't live over there. So it couldn't have been them throwing rocks. So long story short, my brother says, come on, let's go. Grabs his son and they walked up the street. The officer gets belligerent with my brother and says, well, what's your name? So my brother's like, I'm not telling you anything because I didn't commit a crime. Okay? You're talking to my child without my consent. You're the one in the wrong. Don't ask me a thing. So my brother starts to walk back towards his vehicle. As he's getting in the vehicle, the officer grabs my brother. So as you can imagine, my brother jerks away and looks at him like, don't put your hands on me. Okay? The officer says, just give me your name. My brother refuses to give him his name, and he doesn't have to give him his name. I mean, he should have, he could have, but he didn't. Nevertheless, as my brother is trying to back out, the officer's getting his license plate number. And he's like, okay, cool. Since you don't want to give me your name, I got your license plate. I'll get your address, and let's see how you react when you get an eviction notice in the morning. So naturally, we're like, first of all, we don't live over here. Second of all, you can't police with fear. You can't threaten somebody about that. We don't live over here. Number two, how you going to evict somebody that didn't commit a crime, that isn't committing a crime? That's called policing with fear. You cannot do that. So long story short, my aunt then comes out because of the commotion, and all of a sudden, the officer flipped the script. Well, I was just telling him that so he could tell me his name. I wasn't really going to say anything to him, ma'am. But at this time, my aunt is like, nah. What do you mean you're going to have me evicted? So I'm just telling y'all this to tell y'all that these police officers are out here trying to provoke black males. They're trying to, and why would you have, young teenagers, young adolescents on a curb without making sure their parents are present when you make sure the white kids' parents was present? See, that's something that's going to stick with my nephews forever. Being subdued on a corner by a police officer without their parents being present. That's something that's going to be with them forever. That's something you can't, you cannot talk to your kids about that type of thing enough, because what's going to happen is kids, you think, people over 20 have a disdain for police officers. You just wait until, the younger generation, develops that disdain because they hear us talking about it. And people may say, well, you shouldn't talk about it around, your children because, they're going to listen to you and you're going to, plant a bad seed. But I would rather my son know what's going on in the world and know what to expect than to be out there like Boo Boo the Fool and to come to me with well, Dad, I thought everybody was created equal. And, why did he do X, Y, and Z? Or why would I be thrown in jail? I don't want my son to go through that. So I want my son to know, right? So I tell everybody that I know, like right now, and I'm telling the world, right now, if you are pulled over by police, I don't care what it is for, red light, seat, I don't care what it's for, okay? If you're pulled over by the police, get your cell phone and record video, at least audio. I know sometimes you can't set it up because you don't have a tripod or anything in the car, so at least get the audio, but turn your camera on. And if you want to wait till the officer comes to the window, say, hey, officer, before we go any further, just want to let you know I want to turn my camera on, because you can never be too careful. Because I'm telling you, when something goes down, they're not going to tell the truth, and they're not going to believe you. I saw something one day on Instagram. It was a meme, and it said, we can trust the police all we want. Us meaning the black community. But just remember that they're trained not to trust us. And I think that's the truest thing I've ever heard. Because you want to be, hi officer, how you doing? You want to be that way, but they're going to provoke you. They want a reaction from you. I can tell you right now, as a 30-year-old man, I've been pulled over in my lifetime. Since getting my license at 16, I've been pulled over 12 times and has never gotten one ticket. It's always been hey, you were swerving. Hey, you were going a little fast back there, but I've never gotten a ticket, ever. But I've been pulled over several times. So, thank God I've always been, on the right path. I've never been into drugs. I've never drunk alcohol. I don't smoke cigarettes. So, I've always kind of put myself in a position where you can't put anything on me because I'm never around things that, could turn into something bad, ever. Like I've never been around things like that. And I just want people to know that, when we as African Americans say, hey, look, I just want people to understand that we don't wake up every day saying we're going to accuse white people of being racist. Okay, that's not how it goes. I've never in my life woke up saying today is the day I'm going to accuse 10 white people of being racist towards me, because I would rather not even go through that. I would rather my wife, I would rather my children, I would rather, my friends, I would rather my family not have to go through that. But I know it happens. And what makes it worse is I know when they say it happened, society's going to say, no, it didn't happen. Society's going to say, hey, man, look, there's no way it happened. And that part of the game really, really, upsets me, because I understand that you almost don't want to say anything because you figure who's going to believe me? Like, who's going to believe me if I say I was pulled over and the police officer took, my money, and who's going to believe that? When I call the police station, they're going to say, hey, well, we talked to the officer and he said he didn't take anything, so no case, open and shut. Now my money's gone. I'm just out of money. And we saw the case where the young brother was stopped in New York City playing basketball, and he was put on the fence and the cop patted him down, but the officer didn't know that his friend, behind him had his camera on and was recording with his phone. The officer reaches in the man's pocket and pulls his money out and then slides in his pocket. So the guy's like, yo, where my money at? Once he's, let go. Where's my money? And the officer's like, I ain't taking no money. So the next day he goes to the police station. The young man does, and is like, I was harassed by the police, patted down, and he took my money. So it come to find out that the officer didn't even report that he took. Now granted, he had no right to take any money, but let's say he said it was drug money, okay? When he goes back to the precinct, he's supposed to report that money, but he didn't report that money. So as you can imagine, once an investigation happened and the video surfaced, and if they saw the video of him taking the money from the young man's pocket and putting it in his pocket, it was an open and shut case, right? But that's what you're dealing with every day in these inner cities. That's what you're dealing with. Dishonest police officers whose job really their goal every day is to wake up and make our lives as black people, as melanoid people, a living hell. That's just a fact. I've had too many encounters with police officers enough to know that most of them don't mean us any good. And I know you're going to say it's the other way around, but I'm telling y'all, I've been pulled 12 times on the white side of town and on the black side of town. And then on the side of town where it could be either or. And I'm telling you, be it a black cop or a white cop, I've always felt and got a kind of energy that they were being overly aggressive and overly just, you know, overly just like, give me your license and registration, you know, and don't ask any questions and give me your stuff. And when you're trying to ask questions, they like walk away from you. I've dealt with that too many times for me to say, well, I think there's more good cops than bad cops. I think there's more bad cops than good cops because you got to look at really the origin of the police. Now, the police were founded to go capture runaway slaves. Now, some may say that's old. What does that have to do with today? But it has a lot, because you better believe that everything they do, everything they're taught, every bit of training they goes through stems from, hey, new officers, hey, cadets, this is what our origin is. Our origin is here. Here, this is where we started. These are the roots of the modern day police department. So if you think that a police academy student goes through the police academy for however long they must go through, and nobody ever mentions, or in that building there's not a picture or a timeline of where they started as far as, you know, what we call police officers today, where they started and where they are, you better believe that there's some type of graphics or some type of images inside every single police academy that signifies where they started, meaning this is how we became who we are. This is where we got our power. This is why the police were called the police. Because there was a time where if a slave ran, somebody had to go get the slave. Okay, the slave owner didn't go get him. They had to hire somebody, hey, go get my property. Okay, so I just want y'all to understand that, again, because we're living in a system where, you know, we are ruled by a dominant society, we have to accept that at every turn we could be dealing with an officer who may not be out to kill us, but an officer who may be out to make sure you have a bad day. I know we don't want to accept it. I know we don't want to accept that. I know we don't. But I'm telling y'all, when an officer uses language like, and I go back to this, 2 black kids go to my kid's school, but they only go there because their dad works for the school system. That is racist talk 101. That is, and he ain't even a white guy. So please, I can't say white supremacy, but that is just every other race thinking that the black race is inferior to them. And I'm sure when Asians get a certain amount of money, especially in a place like San Francisco where there's a huge Asian community, I'm sure, you know, that they identify with the white society. But when they say something like that, that tells you, and I'm telling you, the police chief was the first to come out and say that the officer said he wasn't racist. That was just, you know, guy talk between him and his friends, and, you know, that's just, but he's not racist. Now, that's like murdering somebody and saying, I'm not a murderer, okay? The fact is, you said something that was talking down, or you made another race seem inferior in your message, in your text message. That's a fact. That's a fact. And, you know, we got to stop giving people passes for disrespecting our race in that manner, because we wake up every single day dealing with this type of oppression. And I don't care what you say. I'm telling y'all right now, anybody that's listening to me right now, there is nothing in this world worse or more difficult than being a black person. Because we deal with all kind of stresses every single day. And I'm talking about the poor black person and the middle class black person and the wealthy black person. Because the wealthy black person wakes up every day needing to be accepted. The wealthy black person wakes up every day saying, I don't want to offend the people that are ultimately keeping me living in this fancy neighborhood. The middle class black person is saying, I don't want to offend the person that's keeping me living in my comfortable neighborhood with my white picket fence that got me with my 2 cars and my 2.5 children. That's what the middle class person is saying. And the poor black person who's saying, I need to get help from somebody, and that somebody's always the dominant society, meaning white people. So because there are no black people right now in society that can literally bring a black person out of poverty, meaning we don't own any major resources, right? The banks that give us home loans, they're white owned. You know, the dealerships, they're white owned. The home builders, they're white. And so we're just in a position where we don't have our own right now. And then we have to go ahead and deal with these racist police officers. I mean, we're getting it every single angle. And people don't want to accept it. People would tell you racism does not exist. I've had people tell me when I have been in these forums and reading these posts, I will not offend anybody. Like, I will never say anything disparaging towards white people. I won't say anything. I'll just state, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I see. This is how I feel. And you better believe I get called a racist more than the racist get called a racist. Now, I'm like, how do you call me a racist when I'm just saying, I'm stating the facts. I'm stating the facts. Okay? Don't tell me this officer isn't racist because he's Asian. Don't tell me he's not racist. He was just talking to his home. No, this is racist. This is racism at its finest. And it's even sadder because who knows how many African Americans or Mexicans or gays he's giving tickets to simply because they were gay, African American, or Hispanic. That went in and paid the fine. And what else happened? Nothing. You know, that was a story that Vice News did. And when I post this podcast, I'm going to post all the links to all the stories I'm talking about. But there was a story recently that Vice News did. They were in New Jersey, and it was called Driving While Black in New Jersey. And what they did was they were trying to figure out, because citizens were saying that this small town in New Jersey was balancing their budget off of traffic fines. So all the tickets were given out in predominantly African-American or non-white neighborhoods. And this town was 60% white. So 60% of the people in this town were white. And the other were Hispanic and black, of course. And so they were trying to figure out why these people were getting pulled over. And most of them were getting pulled over for little, small, stupid stuff. And so they did a bait car. They rented a car, and they had cameras. Vice had cameras sitting in the back, and 2 black males were driving the car. And they were driving through this city, and it was so funny because they knew the neighborhoods they would get pulled over in. And so the camera guy was sitting in the back. And so the first time it wasn't as effective, but it wasn't as effective because he did make an illegal left turn. But the thing was, the officer had followed him for like 4 or 5 miles, like before he made the illegal turn, which gave the officer the right to pull him over. So he's driving, the officer's following me. He's like, yeah, look, the officer's following me. And then after about 4 or 5 miles, he's like, shoot, they're going to pull me because I made an illegal turn. So the officer pulled him, and he's like, how you doing, officer? And the officer's like, I pulled you because you made an illegal turn. And because he knew he made the illegal turn, he didn't ask the officer, well, why would you follow me, though, for like 4 or 5 miles before I made the illegal turn? So we know the true reason why it happened like that. We know. But we don't want to accept it because, again, he made the illegal turn, so that whole argument is null and void. Cool. So they do it again. Go into another neighborhood. Same thing. Same car. Pull, lickety split. This time, though, it's weird because they didn't do any wrong turns. All the lights work. You know what I'm saying? No tint, none of that. So the officer comes to the door, and the young man says, hey, why'd you pull me over? And the officer says, you got some obstruction on your back window. So you know how sometimes, I know we do it as black men when we were younger, you put like fitted caps and things on your back, where your speakers are in the back, you know, in your back windshield. So this in this car, they didn't know, but there was like a jacket back there. But you can still see, but there was a jacket back there. The officer said, I pulled you because you had an obstruction in your back window. So the driver's like, oh, wait a minute. That's not obstructing me. Because the thing is, you know, the whole argument is you, the driver, can't see clearly through that window because you have an obstruction. So I'm going to pull you over and give you a fine because you couldn't see. But the guy's like, I could see clearly. That wasn't even bothering me. He gets the fine. Cool, whatever. So he goes to court, and when they're in court, people are telling stories to the Vice News crew about why they're there. And, you know, most of them were like bogus tickets. And I mean, $85 fine here and there, $65, $125. There was this one kid who said he was driving home, saw an officer behind him, and he pulled into his driveway. And before he got out of the car, the officer threw his lights on. Mind you, he's in his driveway. Officer comes to his car and says, were you at so-and-so and so? It was like a mall or something. He was like, nah, I just came from school. And the officer's like, well, a woman reported somebody looked like you in this kind of car, harassed her. He's like, man, I didn't even come from that side of town. What are you talking about? But that was the officer's way of justifying the traffic stop, even though he's in his driveway. So to make a long story short, the officer then asked him, do you smoke marijuana? Do you drink alcohol? Do you do drugs? And so this young kid, he's like 18, 19 years old. He don't know no better. He lets the officer, because he said, I didn't do nothing wrong. I didn't have no drugs in my car. He lets the officer go through his car and search everything in his car. Ransacked the vehicle, didn't find nothing, but still gave him a fine. Still gave him a fine. So he's in court paying the fine. And so the cameraman says, yo, if you didn't do it, why are you paying the fine? I mean, just a curious question. And he says, I just want to get it over with. I don't really want to keep coming back down here saying I didn't do it, and I got to keep taking time off or time out of school to keep saying I didn't do it. I'd rather just pay the fine and get it over with. And what they found out was that like 70% of that town's budget came from traffic violations. And all of the traffic violations came from minorities. So they talked to the police chief and they say, hey, listen, here's what we found. Here are our findings. What do you have to say about this? And he says, well, listen, we got real-time numbers from January, and it is 50% white as far as traffic. So it's like 1,500 stops. 500 whites, 500 blacks, rough numbers, and 500 Hispanics have been pulled. So equal number. And so the guy that's doing the interview was like, well, how could it be equal when 60% of your town is white? 60%. So that means you take the 40% and you say 20 is African-American, 20 is Hispanic. So how does African-Americans and Hispanics arrest or ticket citations equal the dominant citizens in that town? How? And then the police chief said, listen, there are no racist cops on my force. There are none. Okay, there are no racist cops on my force. So the narrative you're trying to create isn't going to work. And I found that odd because once again, here we are with numbers and facts and society saying it don't exist. It's not true. It's not happening. Y'all are seeing ghosts. That's what they're telling the African-American community. Y'all are seeing ghosts. Racism does not exist. Racism has never existed. Racism has been gone since 1865. We're equal now. Get over it. That's what society is telling African Americans. And I'm raising a son. I got 2 brothers. So every time I'm not around my brothers or my children, I'm thinking to myself, what if they get entangled with one of these racist police officers? And I get that call saying, this happened because your relative did X, Y, and Z. And I'm saying in my mind, there's no way my relative did that. There's no way. But what can I do? The damage is done. They're dead or they're in jail. Right? What can you do? There's nothing you can do. So once again, I tell y'all, and I'm telling y'all, and I will shout this from the top of every single mountain. Tell your wives, tell your daughters, tell your fathers, tell your aunts, tell your uncles, tell your grandmothers, tell everybody that you know that is black or Hispanic or whatever. When you get pulled over by the police, turn your cameras on and let them know what you're doing, because that will stop them from treating us any kind of way and then having the law on their side when we say, hearsay, the officer did this or the officer did that. Okay? See, because I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. This officer in San Francisco, he's going to be fired. He's going to move to another town and get another job. Guarantee you. All right? The officer in New York, Peter Liang, who got off for murdering Akai Gurley, he's on probation. 5 years, 800 hours of community service. He's young, 28. So by the time he's 35, he'll have another job on a police force in some other town. And people will have been forgotten about everything that went down. We can't bring Akai Gurley back. It's done. It's gone. But we can make sure this type of thing does not happen again. And I say record everything. If it's illegal in your state, make sure it's unillegal. You know, go pass your laws, talk to your politicians, figure out what you have to do to make sure that's not illegal, because you should be able to have your own protection when you're the only one there. It shouldn't just be trust what the officer says, because we all know every officer is not being honest with us. And that's a fact. That's a fact. And I say this every time, every chance I get. I'm not against white people. I'm not. Okay? I'm not against any other race, because I say I'm 100% for my people. But every other race has us together. They have the things in place that they need to make sure when these type of things happen, you know, they get justice for themselves. We don't. Marching in the streets, I'm sorry, it don't help us none. Just be honest with y'all, it don't. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, you tear your shoes up, that's it. You know what I mean? You get news coverage for about 2 or 3 days. But as you can see, if the people who control the judicial system and the legal system says, we don't think he's guilty, he's not guilty, okay? It's a very what I say type of situation. I don't think he's guilty and he's not guilty. I don't care about the proof, the video, the witnesses. I don't care, right? Because in this case against us, all those things matter. But when it's case against them, none of those things matter. It's just simply, I feel as though. That's why the Ken Thompson, the DA, need to be voted out of office, man, because he's the one that kind of set that whole snowball effect of saying, hey, it was an accident. I don't think he should spend time in jail. He was a rookie. So it's just, you know, let's just chalk it up to him being a rookie cop. But there ain't no excuse, man. This brother is dead. His girlfriend has to live with the fact that he died in her arms forever. Forever. His mom got to live with the fact that her son died in a dark stairwell, a dark, dirty, drafty stairwell. You know what I mean? At the hands of an unprepared rookie cop who made a stupid mistake. I'm not saying the officer did it on purpose. I know he didn't. But the fact that he's patrolling an all-black neighborhood with his gun drawn says he already has a preconceived notion of what could happen if he didn't have his gun out. That's a fact, right? I don't care what you say. That's a fact. So, I mean, I would love to dialogue with y'all, man. I'm going to try to do this show at least once a week. If I could do it more, I will. But let's just say right now, I want to do it at least once a week. You know what I'm saying? And I'd love to have y'all, you know, I'm going to try to do it live sometime. And still, check out my YouTube. Again, go to YouTube, type in Raleigh Rell, or Google Raleigh Rell. Yeah, just stay up to what I'm doing. I'm on Instagram as well, at Raleigh Rell, Twitter, at Raleigh Rell, and I'm going to put all this stuff in the description. So just please, like I said before, stay up with me, follow me, subscribe, check your RSS feed, because I'm going to try to do this thing as much as I can, because I'm really, you know, for empowering people, you know what I mean? And I'm really for empowering my people, and I don't want anybody to feel like they don't have a voice. You know what I mean? If you're dealing with racism at your job, you know, with people in everyday life, speak on it. You know what I'm saying? Speak on it. And we're gonna try our best to expose it so we can deal with it head on. And that means just empowering ourselves, because I mean, at the end of the day, you know, it's really all us. You know what I mean? Like, ain't nobody gonna help us You know what I mean? Society sees everything we do as complaining. You know what I mean? We could get beat over the head with a daggone bat, and they'll say, well, what did you do to get beat over the head with the bat? You know what I mean? Even if what we did was very minor, like stealing some candy or you know what I'm saying? I don't know, just doing something very minor. Society has a way of saying, well, you deserved it. You know what I mean? You kind of deserved it. And we gotta get rid of that kind of mentality. And until then, we're going to continue to be dealing with racists. So, hope y'all like the show. Hope y'all enjoyed the show. I'm going to take y'all out with my boy David Banner. Got a new album out called Before the Box. Dope. Best David Banner I've ever heard. And if you know the new David Banner, you understand what this album is about. It's about empowerment. You know what I mean? It's not about hating all the races, it's about empowerment. So, again, I am Rell. This is the Rell Talk Podcast. Glad y'all listened, and holler at y'all next time, all right?
Left in the streets. Yana Jones, 7 years old, shot dead in a sleep. Eric gonna choke, man. Fuck the police.
For la policía, I be like, for la policía,
Hey, go! This was black and brown all over the world. United.
I know some good ones out there. We ain't talking about y'all though, man.